Hello and welcome to this edition of Your Questions Answered by Father Gruner. I'm John Veneri. We take your questions that you send us via email, and Father Gruner answers them. We talk about them. This program changes every day, so please stay tuned every day and continue to send us your questions at questions@thefatimacenter.com. Someone's asking us to talk about the connection between what's prophesied in 2 Thessalonians 2:11, where there's the warning that the term here is strong delusion. The Douay, I think, says a deceiving influence that God will send. What's the connection between that? Is there a connection between that and what Sister Lucy spoke of as the diabolic disorientation, and also the connection to the third secret?
Okay, well, I think that in St. Paul's letter to the Thessalonians, second Thessalonians, second chapter, he talks about the reason why the Antichrist can come is because the faithful have lost their love of truth. So the love of truth is a fundamental virtue. Almost all other virtues, in a certain sense, depend upon it. And even St. Paul, of course, praises charity as the greatest of virtues, which it is, but he says that charity rejoices in the truth. So that you really can't love somebody. I mean, what is charity? Charity is love of God and love of your neighbor for the love of God. But what does another way? The way the Italians translate love is something to volere bene, to wish the good to the other. Okay, so or to will the good for the other. So you can't will the good for someone if you don't know him and you don't know what's good for him. So you can't really love him if you don't do it in the truth. So the truth is important for everything. And the problem is that because people have lost their love of truth, then God sends them a deceiving influence or strong delusion. And what we have today is, for example, God has, we in this century, in this time, in this generation, we are the inheritors of the results of our forefathers' sins. I mean, we're also the inheritors of our forefathers' good things, but also their sins. So, and things have come to a climax in our time that either we're almost at that point, almost instantly, that we're going to either go towards world peace, and the whole world gets rid of its arms and turns their swords into plowshares, or we're going into world war. And what we saw at the end of World War II was the dropping of the atomic bomb. It put on a whole other scale the kind of weapons they're using, so that it won't be as long as World War II, but it'll be as many times more destructive because of the power of these weapons. So we're at mankind, the whole of mankind is at this crossroads. Now God has given us a special grace for our time, which is the message of Fatima, saying you can avoid that. You can avoid the annihilation of nations. You can avoid the destruction of entire peoples. You can avoid turning USA into a nuclear waste, as was mentioned on Russian TV recently. You can avoid all that by one action. Give the credit to Our Lady, have the Pope and the bishops consecrate Russia to the Immaculate Heart of Mary, and she will see that that doesn't happen. Or we can ignore her. We say, oh, we don't have to pay any attention to that. We're more interested in our fun and games. Well, it's because they've lost the love for truth that they don't pay attention to this. Oh, well, who cares about that? It doesn't matter. Well, I'm sorry, actions have consequences. We don't deserve the period of peace, but God wants to give it to us, but he expects us to at least give a token of some sort to get it. But if we're not going to do that, then we're going to have this. So, in turn, why is this happening? Because people do not love the truth, and therefore, since they do not love the truth, there's a deceiving influence. You have Cardinal Bertone out there, one deceiving influence, saying the consecration is done. You have Cardinal Bertone out there saying we're giving you the whole third secret. Both of them are false. I mean, am I smarter than Cardinal Bertone? No. But do I know they're false? Yes. Can anyone else figure that out? Yeah, hey, you put half the work I put into it, and you can figure it out for yourself. We put out books, we've done all the work for you. Figure out that they're telling us lies. These are delusions, okay? And that's not the only ones. But maybe you have a part I'm not answering the question here.
Well, I think too, what happens is that when we turn away from God, then God withdraws His grace and leaves us to ourselves. Yeah. And I remember reading that St. Thomas Aquinas said that the first fruit of unchastity is blindness of spirit.
Yes.
So we indulge in things, we let our passions rule us, and as a result, our intellect should rule us. And as a kind of a punishment, we lose some power of our intellect to see clearly, especially in spiritual things. And I think this happens in a nation, and it happens in a world that constantly turns against God.
Well, when we see people saying that we have a right to commit sin, first of all, the whole idea is that, why did God create the power of procreation? The power of procreation is logically for having children, but God doesn't want everyone to have children indiscriminately. He wants to, among a married couple, so that the couple will take care of that child and educate the child, not only feed him, not only take care of him physically, but also take care of him intellectually and spiritually. And he needs his education. So that's why God has said that the power of procreation is a sacred power in which you cooperate with me, that is with God, in bringing about new life, but it's a sacred power. You can only use it under certain circumstances. But
Within the veil of marriage, yes.
Within marriage, and only between a man and a woman. So the idea that somehow we have a right, where do the rights come from? Rights don't come from because I decree you have a right, John, you have a right to, I don't know, to a green pen. You have a right you have rights to things that God gives us. And those rights, why do we have those rights? So we can fulfill our obligations to God. We can't, just as the parent has the right to educate the children, he also has the obligation to educate the children. The state hasn't got the right to educate the child, it's the parent that has the right to educate the child. And therefore the parent's rights in this regard cannot be trampled on by the state or by the church for that matter. Now the right to educate the child is, I'm going to teach him to walk on the ceiling. No, you have to teach him the truth. You have to teach him what's wholesome and good for him. But my point only is that this thing here, that so if we abuse our body either for relations between a man and a woman who are not married, or worse, abuse it between two men or two women, I mean, we're making a mockery of God's creation for one thing, and secondly, there's a penalty to pay in this life, not just the next life. And yes, and St. Thomas is right. I mean, it's also noted. I mean, the same thing with if a person drinks too much, as they get drunk, then they misestimate. I mean, whether they're driving the car, they can't quite see as clearly, or they don't have the same sense of their reflexes as they had when they were sober. But there's a penalty for drinking too much. There's also a penalty for committing sins against the Sixth Commandment, and those penalties they're pretty well written into the nature of the thing.
So, the question of the diabolical disorientation and the Second Thessalonians, there does seem to be a link, and we'll pick it up on the next program because this person's asked another question: is how do we recognize it, especially within the church today?
Sure.
So we'll talk about that in the next program.